Lisa served coffee to pilots every day at the airport cafe. They saw her as just another waitress who knew nothing about flying. But when the Cessna's engine began failing at 8,000 feet, they would learn their waitress was actually a former flight instructor with more flying experience than their pilot. Lisa Parker had worked at the Skyline Cafe for 10 years. Every morning at 5:15, she would unlock the door and start the coffee machines. The cafe sat right next to San Diego Airport, with big windows that looked out at the runway. Most people saw Lisa as just another waitress. She was 42 years old, not too tall, with brown hair and green eyes. Customers knew her as friendly and hardworking. She never got orders wrong. She remembered everyone's names and their favorite coffee, but no one noticed how Lisa watched the planes outside. When customers sat by the window, she would look up at the sky. Her eyes would follow each aircraft as it took off or landed. In her desk drawer, Lisa kept an old photo. It showed a younger woman in a Navy pilot uniform, standing next to a small training plane. The woman in the photo was Lisa, 10 years ago. She had been one of the first female flight instructors in the Navy pilot program. That was before the accident, before she lost everything and became just a quiet cafe waitress. Lisa would look at that photo sometimes, then close the drawer quickly. Those days were over. Now she served coffee and sandwiches to pilots and airport workers. They treated her like she knew nothing about flying. The Skyline Cafe opened at 5:30 every morning. It stayed busy all day, serving everyone who worked at or visited the airport. Lisa knew all the regular customers. There was Captain Rodriguez, who always ordered black coffee and a blueberry muffin, Mrs. Chin, the air traffic controller who liked her coffee with extra cream, and young pilot trainee Jake, who was always nervous before his flying lessons. They all thought Lisa was just a waitress who happened to work near planes. Lisa had learned not to correct them. When pilots talked about flying problems, she stayed quiet. When they discussed weather conditions or aircraft troubles, she just smiled and poured more coffee. It was easier that way. But deep inside, Lisa still remembered everything. She knew about engine systems, radio frequencies, and emergency procedures. She could read weather patterns and understand flight instruments. All that knowledge stayed hidden, locked away like the photo in her drawer. On Tuesday morning, the cafe was busier than usual. A small charter company was running flights to Los Angeles, and several passengers had come in for breakfast before their 9 a.m. departure. Lisa served coffee to the group. There was Mr. Harrison, a businessman in an expensive suit, Mrs. Williams, an elderly woman visiting her daughter, two college students, Amy and Ben, who looked excited about their first time in a small plane, and Dr. Martinez, who kept checking his watch and seemed worried about being late for an important meeting. "Don't worry," said Captain Pete Stevens, the pilot, as he joined the group. "We'll have you in LA in no time. The Cessna 208 is a reliable aircraft." Lisa recognized Captain Stevens. He was new to the charter company, young and confident, maybe a little too confident. She had seen him around the airport, always talking loudly about his flying skills. "Is it safe in a small plane?" asked Mrs. Williams nervously. "Safer than driving on the highway," Stevens replied with a big smile. "I've been flying for 5 years. Never had a problem." Lisa continued cleaning tables, but she listened carefully. 5 years wasn't very much experience, especially for charter flights. She had trained pilots with more hours who still made mistakes. "We'll be flying at about 8,000 feet, Stevens continued. "Beautiful view of the coastline. The weather looks perfect." But Lisa had checked the weather reports that morning. There were some clouds building to the north, and wind conditions might change. She wanted to say something, but stopped herself. Who would listen to a waitress? As the passengers finished breakfast, Stevens announced it was time to go. "The plane is ready for boarding. We'll be taking off in about 20 minutes. The charter company had asked Lisa to come along as cabin service for this flight. It was something she did occasionally, serving drinks and snacks to passengers during the flight. The extra money helped, and it let her be around aircraft again, even if just as a waitress in the sky. "Are you coming with us today, Lisa?" asked Drive Martinez. "Yes, I'll be taking care of everyone during the flight," Lisa replied, wiping her hands with a towel. She grabbed her small service bag and followed the group outside. The morning air was cool, and she could smell jet fuel and sea salt from the nearby ocean. The Cessna 208 Caravan sat on the tarmac, white with blue stripes. It was a single-engine turboprop designed to carry up to 9 passengers. Lisa had flown similar aircraft during her Navy days. She knew the plane well, its strengths and its weaknesses. Captain Stevens did his pre-flight check quickly, too quickly, Lisa thought. But she stayed quiet and helped passengers get settled. Mrs. Williams took a seat near the front, still looking nervous. The college students sat together in the middle, taking pictures with their phones. Mr. Harrison had his laptop out already, trying to work. Dr. Martinez chose a window seat and immediately put on headphones. Lisa sat in row 8, the last row of passenger seats. From there she could see everyone and help if they needed anything. She also had a clear view of the cockpit door, which Stevens had left open. "Good morning, everyone," Stevens announced over the intercom. "Welcome aboard Pacific Charter Flight 47. Our flight time to Los Angeles will be about 2 hours. Lisa will be serving refreshments once we reach cruising altitude." The engine started with a low rumble. Lisa felt the familiar vibration of an aircraft coming to life. Part of her missed this feeling, the moment before takeoff when anything seemed possible. They taxied to the runway, Stevens chatting casually with air traffic control. His radio work sounded professional enough, Lisa noted. Maybe she was being too critical. "Flight 47, you're cleared for takeoff, runway 27, came the voice from the tower. Stevens pushed the throttle forward. The Cessna accelerated down the runway, faster and faster. Lisa felt the moment when the wheels left the ground. They were flying. San Diego spread out below them, the airport, the bay, the city stretching inland toward the mountains. Lisa watched through her small window, remembering when she used to be the one flying the plane instead of just riding in it. For the first 30 minutes, everything went smoothly. They climbed to their cruising altitude of 8,000 feet. The passengers relaxed. Mrs. Williams stopped gripping her armrest. Amy and Ben pointed out landmarks below. Lisa got up to serve drinks. Juice for the college students, coffee for Mr. Harrison, water for everyone else. Just like in the cafe, she knew what each person wanted. "How long have you been a flight attendant?" asked Amy. "I'm not really a flight attendant," Lisa explained. "I usually work at the Skyline Cafe near the airport. Sometimes I help serve passengers on charter flights." "That's so cool. Do you like flying?" Lisa smiled. "Yes, I do." She didn't mention that she used to fly planes herself. These passengers saw her as cabin service, someone who brought them drinks and pretzels. It was better to keep it simple. About an hour into the flight, Lisa noticed something wrong. The engine sound had changed just slightly. It was still running, but there was a different tone to it, more strain, less smooth power. She looked toward the cockpit. Stevens was checking his instruments, a small frown on his face. He adjusted something on the panel, and the engine sound improved a little. Lisa went back to her seat, but she kept listening. 20 minutes later, the sound changed again. This time it was more noticeable. Several passengers looked up from their books and phones. "Is everything okay?" Mrs. Williams called toward the cockpit. "Just some minor turbulence," Stevens replied. "Nothing to worry about." But Lisa knew it wasn't turbulence. She had heard that sound before, during her training days. It was the engine working too hard, struggling to maintain power. The plane started to vibrate slightly, not the normal vibration of flight, but something irregular. Lisa gripped her armrest and watched Stevens in the cockpit. He was definitely having problems now. "The plane feels different, Mr. Harrison said, looking up from his laptop. "Everything's fine," Stevens announced over the intercom. "We're just adjusting our altitude slightly due to wind conditions." Lisa felt the plane start to descend. Not a normal descent, but something uncontrolled. Stevens was fighting with the controls. She could see his shoulders tense through the cockpit door. The college students stopped taking pictures. Dr. Martinez pulled off his headphones and looked around nervously. "Lisa," Mrs. Williams called out, her voice shaky, "is this normal?" Lisa unbuckled her seat belt and stood up, holding on to seats for balance. The plane was definitely having serious problems now. She could hear Stevens on the radio talking to air traffic control, but his voice sounded stressed. She moved toward the front of the cabin, past the worried passengers. Through the cockpit door, she could see the instrument panel. Several warning lights were flashing. The engine parameters looked wrong. Oil pressure dropping, temperature rising. Stevens was sweating now, his hands moving quickly over the controls. "Mayday, Mayday," he said into his radio. "This is Pacific Charter 47. We have engine problems and are losing altitude." The word Mayday sent shock through the cabin. "Mrs. Williams started crying. Amy grabbed Ben's hand. "Mr. Harrison closed his laptop and stared straight ahead. Lisa knew she had to make a choice. Stay in her seat and let Stevens handle it, or step forward and offer help. But if she offered help, she would have to reveal who she really was. The plane shuddered and dropped suddenly. Overhead bins rattled. Someone screamed. Lisa made her decision. "Captain Stevens," Lisa said firmly, moving to the cockpit door. "I need to ask you something important. What exactly is happening with the engine?" Stevens looked back at her, surprised and annoyed. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. I'm handling the situation. I can see you're having oil pressure problems and the engine temperature is rising," Lisa continued. "How many hours do you have on the Cessna 208 specifically?" Stevens stared at her in shock. What are you talking about? You're the cabin service. I'm also a former Navy pilot and flight instructor with over 2,000 hours in turboprops," Lisa said calmly. "Right now, we need to work together, or everyone on this plane is going to die." The passengers heard every word. The cabin went completely quiet except for the struggling engine. "You're a pilot?" Stevens asked, his voice cracking with stress. "Former pilot. I've been working as a waitress for 10 years. Lisa looked at the instruments again. The situation was getting worse fast. "Captain, I need to know your experience level right now. This is not the time for ego." Stevens looked at the flashing warning lights, then back at Lisa. His confidence was gone, replaced by fear. I have about 200 hours total. Only 50 hours in the 208. I don't know what to do. The engine is failing, and we're losing altitude too fast." Lisa felt the plane continue its dangerous descent. They were at about 5,000 feet now, dropping steadily. She could see the ground getting closer through the windscreen. "May I look at the instruments?" she asked. Stevens nodded quickly. "Please, I'll take any help I can get." Lisa squeezed into the cockpit doorway and studied the panel. The oil pressure was critically low, engine temperature in the red zone. They had maybe 5 minutes before complete engine failure. "Pacific Charter 47, this is San Diego approach," came the voice on the radio. "What is your current status?" Stevens reached for the microphone with a shaking hand, but Lisa gently took it from him. "San Diego approach, this is Pacific Charter 47. We have a qualified pilot on board assisting. Engine oil pressure is critical, temperature redlined. We need immediate vectors to the nearest airport and emergency equipment standing by." "Charter 47, copy. Are you declaring an emergency?" "Affirmative. We are declaring a full emergency. We have 6 souls on board and are losing altitude rapidly due to impending engine failure." Lisa's voice was calm and professional, completely different from the quiet waitress the passengers thought they knew. "Stevens," Lisa said, "I need you to throttle back immediately. We're cooking the engine by trying to maintain power, but we'll lose more altitude." Stevens protested. "We're going to lose the engine completely in about 3 minutes if we don't reduce power right now. We need to set up for a dead stick landing." Stevens pulled the throttle back. The engine noise decreased, but so did their power. The plane started descending faster. "Charter 47, came the radio, the nearest airport is Palomar, about 15 miles northeast of your position. Can you make it?" Lisa looked at their altitude, 3,500 feet and dropping. She calculated quickly in her head. Distance, wind, glide ratio of the Cessna 208. "Negative, San Diego. We won't make Palomar. What other options do we have?" "Standby, Charter 47. Lisa turned to address the passengers. They were all staring at her with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Everyone, listen to me carefully. I'm Lisa Parker, and I used to be a Navy flight instructor. Right now, we're having serious engine problems, but I want you to know that this aircraft can glide safely even without engine power. Mrs. Williams was crying quietly. The college students held hands. Mr. Harrison had gone pale, and Dr. Martinez was gripping his armrest. I need you all to put your seat belts on tight and put your heads down when I tell you. We're going to have to make an emergency landing. Are we going to crash? Amy asked, her voice small and scared. No, Lisa said firmly. We're going to land hard, but we're going to land safely. I promise you that. She turned back to Stevens. I need to take the controls. But you're not current. You don't have authority. Stevens, look at me. I have more experience in aircraft like this than you do. Right now, experience is the only thing that's going to save these people's lives. Will you let me fly this plane? Stevens looked at the instruments, then at Lisa. He nodded and moved to the right seat. Lisa slipped into the pilot's seat. Her hands found the controls naturally, like putting on an old familiar coat. It had been 10 years since she'd flown, but muscle memory kicked in immediately. The plane felt different under her control. Stevens had been fighting it, but Lisa worked with it. She adjusted their glide angle, found the best airspeed for maximum distance. Charter 47, we have a possible landing site, the radio crackled. There's a straight section of Highway 78 about 8 miles east of your position. Very light traffic. Emergency vehicles are responding. Lisa looked ahead. She could see the highway, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the hills. It wasn't ideal, but it was their best option. Copy. San Diego. We're setting up for a highway landing on 78. Estimated touchdown in about 6 minutes. Everyone, Lisa announced over the intercom, we're going to land on a highway in about 5 minutes. I need you to brace for impact. Head down, hands behind your head. Mrs. Williams, the college students, help each other with the position. She could hear movement in the cabin as passengers prepared themselves. Stevens, she said quietly, I need you to help me with the checklist. Emergency landing procedures. Stevens pulled out the emergency checklist with shaking hands. Fuel. Should we shut off the fuel? Not yet. The engine might give us a little more power if we need it. Lisa was flying the plane in a steady glide, conserving every foot of altitude. Landing gear, up or down? Stevens asked. Lisa thought for a moment. Down. The highway might be rough, but gear up would be more dangerous for the passengers. The landing gear extended with a solid thunk. The plane's glide performance decreased slightly, but they were committed now. Through the windscreen, Lisa could see the highway getting closer. Cars were pulling over to the sides as emergency vehicles cleared the road. She could see fire trucks and ambulances racing along the shoulder. Charter 47, this is California Highway Patrol, came a new voice on the radio. We have cleared approximately 1 mile of highway for your landing. Surface is clear, no obstacles. Wind is light and variable. Copy. Highway Patrol. Thank you. Lisa's hands were steady on the controls, but her heart was pounding. She hadn't done an emergency landing in years, but all her training was coming back. Navy procedures, countless hours in simulators, real emergencies she'd handled as an instructor. 2 minutes to touchdown, she announced to the passengers. Remember, heads down, brace position. The highway filled the windscreen now. Lisa could see individual cars, people standing beside the road watching. The plane was coming in fast, faster than a normal landing, but that was unavoidable without engine power. Airspeed looks good, Stevens said, reading the instruments. 1 minute, Lisa called out. The plane crossed over the last hill before the highway. Lisa could see their touchdown point clearly now. She made small adjustments with the controls, lining up with the center of the road. The ground rushed up toward them. Brace for impact, Lisa shouted. The Cessna's wheels hit the asphalt hard, much harder than a normal landing. The plane bounced once, came down again, bounced again. Lisa fought to keep it straight as they rolled down the highway at high speed. The brakes worked, but not well on the rough road surface. The plane gradually slowed, but they were still moving fast as they approached the end of the cleared section. Come on, Lisa muttered, applying more brake pressure. Finally, the Cessna rolled to a stop about 200 yards from the end of the cleared area. Steam rose from the brakes, and the engine ticked as it cooled down. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Mrs. Williams started crying, but this time from relief. Is everyone okay? Lisa called out. One by one, the passengers responded, shaken, scared, but alive and unhurt. Emergency vehicles surrounded the plane immediately. Paramedics, firefighters, police officers. Lisa shut down all the aircraft systems and opened the cabin door. "Everybody out, slowly and carefully," she instructed. The passengers filed out of the plane, helped by the emergency workers. Mrs. Williams hugged one of the paramedics. Amy and Ben were shaking but smiling. Mr. Harrison looked dazed. Dr. Martinez was already on his phone, probably calling his family. Stevens climbed out of the cockpit, his face pale. "Lisa," he said quietly, "thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Lisa was the last to leave the aircraft. She stood for a moment in the doorway, looking back at the cabin where she had just saved 6 lives, then stepped down onto the highway. The local news crews arrived within an hour. "Heroic Waitress Saves Charter Flight" was the headline that would run that evening, but Lisa didn't want to talk to reporters. She sat in the back of an ambulance, giving her statement to an FAA investigator. "So you're telling me you're a former Navy pilot who's been working as a waitress for 10 years? The investigator asked. "That's correct. And you have current knowledge of Cessna 208 systems and emergency procedures?" "I maintain my aircraft knowledge even though I wasn't flying professionally anymore." The investigator made notes in his file. "We'll need to review your credentials and interview the passengers, but from preliminary reports, it sounds like you handled the emergency exactly right." One by one, the passengers came over to thank her. Mrs. Williams hugged her with tears in her eyes. Amy and Ben wanted to take pictures with her. Mr. Harrison shook her hand formally but warmly. Dr. Martinez offered to pay for her medical insurance for a year. "Why didn't you tell us you were a pilot?" Amy asked. Lisa smiled sadly. "Because nobody asked the waitress what she used to do before she brought them coffee." Later that evening, Lisa sat in the office of the charter company owner, Richard Hayes. Also present were representatives from the FAA and the insurance company. "Miss Parker," Hayes began, "first, let me say we're all grateful for what you did today. You saved lives, including one of my aircraft. I was just doing what needed to be done. But I have to ask, why didn't we know about your aviation background? We hire you for cabin service, and it turns out you're more qualified than some of our pilots." Lisa took a deep breath. "Because 10 years ago, after I left the Navy, I applied for pilot positions with every airline and charter company on the West Coast. I was told I didn't have enough civilian hours, or that I was too old, or that I didn't fit their image of what they wanted." She paused, remembering those frustrating months of rejections. "I needed work, so I took a job at the Skyline Cafe. It paid the bills and kept me close to aviation. Eventually, I stopped trying to get back into flying. It was easier to just serve coffee to pilots than to keep getting rejected by them." The FAA representative leaned forward. "Miss Parker, your license is still valid. Your medical certificate expired, but that can be renewed. Have you considered returning to professional aviation?" Lisa looked out the window, where she could see aircraft landing at San Diego International. "I thought about it every day for the first few years. Then I thought about it every week. Eventually, I just thought about it sometimes, when I watched planes take off from the cafe windows." "Well," Hayes said, "after today, I think it's time you seriously considered it again. I'd like to offer you a position as a charter pilot with our company, full-time, competitive salary, and we'll pay for your medical renewal and any additional training you need." Lisa stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. You proved today that you're exactly the kind of pilot we need, experienced, calm under pressure, and able to handle real emergencies." Lisa walked back to the Skyline Cafe that evening. It was closed, but she had her key. She sat at her usual table by the window, looking out at the runway. Her phone had been ringing all day, other charter companies wanting to hire her, a regional airline asking about her interest in applying, even a flight school that wanted her to come back as an instructor. For 10 years, she had watched other people fly planes. She had served coffee to pilots who had half her experience. She had smiled and stayed quiet when they made mistakes she could have helped them avoid. But today, when it mattered most, her skills had saved lives. She pulled out her phone and dialed Hayes' number. "Mr. Hayes, this is Lisa Parker. About that pilot position, I'd like to accept. That's wonderful news, Lisa. When can you start? How about Monday? I need to give my notice at the cafe, but I think they'll understand. After hanging up, Lisa went to her desk and opened the drawer. She pulled out the old photograph, the young Navy pilot standing proudly next to the training aircraft. For 10 years, this picture had represented her past. Now, maybe, it could represent her future too. She looked around the cafe one more time. The coffee machines, the tables where she'd served thousands of cups of coffee, the windows where she'd watched countless planes take off and land. Tomorrow she would tell her regular customers that she was leaving, Captain Rodriguez, Mrs. Chin, young Jake, the nervous student pilot. They would be surprised to learn their friendly waitress was actually an experienced aviator. But tonight, she just sat and watched the planes in the sky, and for the first time in 10 years, she imagined herself flying again. 6 months later, Lisa stood in the pilot's lounge at San Diego International, wearing her new captain's uniform. She was scheduled to fly a charter to Phoenix in an hour, with Stevens as her co-pilot. Stevens had requested to fly with her whenever possible. The emergency landing had taught him that there was still a lot to learn about aviation, and he wanted to learn from someone with real experience. "Ready for another flight, Captain Parker?" he asked. Lisa smiled. "Always ready." Through the lounge window, she could see the Skyline Cafe. Her replacement, a young woman named Maria, was serving coffee to the morning customers. Lisa had trained her personally, making sure she knew all the regular orders. "You know," Stevens said, following her gaze, "I still can't believe you worked there for 10 years. All that experience and nobody knew." "Sometimes people only see what they expect to see," Lisa replied. "A waitress is just a waitress until she grabs the microphone and saves your life." The boarding announcement came over the intercom. Lisa picked up her flight bag and headed toward the gate. As she walked through the terminal, she passed the gate where Pacific Charter Flight 47 had been scheduled to depart 6 months ago. A small plaque had been installed on the wall, recognizing the emergency landing and the lives saved. But Lisa didn't stop to read it. She had work to do. Mrs. Williams was waiting at the gate for today's flight to Phoenix. She had specifically requested to fly with Captain Parker whenever she traveled. Now, when she saw Lisa approaching in her pilot's uniform, she smiled with genuine warmth. "Good morning, Captain. I feel so much safer knowing you're flying today." "Good morning, Mrs. Williams. Ready for a smooth flight to Phoenix? With you as our pilot, I know it will be." As Lisa conducted her pre-flight briefing with Stevens and prepared for departure, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, from Navy pilot, to unemployed veteran, to waitress, to charter captain. It hadn't been the career path she'd planned, but maybe it was the one she'd needed. The experiences at the Skyline Cafe had taught her patience, attention to detail, and how to stay calm under pressure, skills that made her a better pilot now than she'd been 10 years ago. The engine started, and Lisa felt the familiar thrill of being in command of an aircraft again. But this time it felt different. She wasn't just flying for her own career or advancement. She was flying for passengers who trusted her based on a reputation earned through action rather than just credentials. As they taxied toward the runway, Lisa caught sight of the Skyline Cafe one more time. Maria was serving coffee to a table of pilots, probably listening to them discuss weather and flight plans, just as Lisa used to do. Lisa hoped that Maria was just a waitress who enjoyed working around aviation. But if she was something more, if she had dreams or experience that nobody recognized, Lisa hoped she wouldn't have to wait 10 years and risk her life to prove what she was capable of. San Diego ground, Pacific Charter 73, ready for taxi. Charter 73, taxi to runway 27, number 1 for departure. Lisa smiled and pushed the throttles forward. She was exactly where she belonged, in the pilot's seat, taking care of her passengers, using her skills to their fullest potential. The waitress in row 8 was gone. Captain Lisa Parker had taken her place. And somewhere in the sky above San Diego, another Cessna was flying safely home, guided by a pilot who understood that sometimes the most important qualifications can't be seen on a resume. They can only be revealed in the moments when everything depends on who you really are.